You want
Patrician. Okay, how are we saying this? The former First Lady of Claude Chabrol's, who is her ex-husband, by the way. Chabrol's film. I'm just going to go Anglo on it. Films is an irresistible force of nature. Should say tour de force, but whatever. She sallies forth from Paris. No, she doesn't. She crawls out as a refugee to pit cultured paganism against diehard Christian frugality. And as soon as we see her concerned gourmet hand hover over the condemned turtle, we know it is all up for Danish self-denial and that Denison is served. I don't like that.
Let the movie speak.
Well, everybody, we're going to do a review of a movie today because this is Let the Movie Speak. You already heard a review of a review in the intro.
You've got to stop recording me when I don't know it's on.
It's better this way. If you don't know, my name's Travis.
And I'm Annie.
And if you're just tuning in for the first time, I'll talk to that person, which I never do, but I'm going to right now for some reason. On this show, normally what we do is we go through different decades and we talk about some significant films or some films that piqued our interest, at least, of a given decade. And we started this whole thing with the 30s, which is the first speaking films decade. And so we're just trying to get like a sampling of what does each decade kind of feel like and how do the films fit into the cultural, historical context. And so this dinner party series, if you've been enjoying it or if you're about to enjoy this, which I hope you are, this is just like our little in-betweener kind of like mini series. So I wanted to, Annie, if we can, attempt to give the potential listener, well, they're listening, so they're not potential listeners, but the listener and potential future listener, a taste of the future.
Sure.
A taste. Oh, I should have made more of that. We have a list of 1960s films that how many times have we come back to this and re-looked at it to make sure it was correct?
Way more than we should have.
Probably too many times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We started it probably a month ago. Yeah.
Minimum. Yeah.
Yeah. And we thought we had it all figured out, and then it grew and shrank and grew and shrank.
Every time we look at it, we change it.
Yeah. There was one particular one that I think you've already mentioned in vague terms that we were like, oh, this will be cool. And then we learned a little more about it and went, please, no.
Should we just say it was in cold blood?
It was in cold blood, which looked interesting until it looked really creepy.
Yeah. If any of you ever want to find me and talk about the book, I'm here all day.
Yes.
But maybe not the film.
Yeah, it looked a little too real. So on that note, I would like to take the last couple episodes of this series to give people a taste. What are we looking forward to in the 60s series? So what is one film, Annie? That
Only one?
You have one for now.
One for now. All right. Well, my nerd answer.
Yes.
My nerd answer is that I am really looking forward to seeing Kurosawa's attempt at noir. And attempt makes it sound like it was a failure.
He probably sucks.
I'm actually really excited.
Yeah.
I want to see Kurosawa do noir.
Yeah.
And so it's a film called High and Low.
Mm-hmm.
And it stars
Toshiro Mifune,
whose name I have to think about very hard before I say it.
Yep.
Who also starred in Throne of Blood.
Stray Dog.
He's
in a bunch of, he's in like almost every Kurosawa movie.
Right. So that's my nerd answer.
Okay. Yeah, that looks great. I hope it's as good as Stray Dog was, because Stray Dog was super fun. And okay, the movie I'm looking forward to this week, I'll give you my preview. Come Blow Your Horn. 1964's Come Blow. Now, doesn't that just bring memories of childhood gathered around the television where you all would sit down to watch Come Blow Your Horn together?
No.
Okay. This movie has Frank Sinatra in it, and I know, and a couple other actors that we recognize that look
people you'd recognize.
Cool. But what kind of fascinated me about it once we found it was that it was released under one name and then re-released under this name. Like they added in scenes or plot lines or songs. Or,
Yeah, so we want to investigate
we need.
what is going on with this movie.
We have got to get to the bottom of this. I don't know what the heck happened with Come Blow Your Horn, but the fact that we've never heard of it probably means it's really, really good, right?
Yeah, well, we get to hear Sinatra sing, so.
Well, that's never bad. So.
No.
Anyway, we hope you join us for the 60s series. And since it's been a while since we've mentioned it, this whole podcast thing works off of your guys' interaction with us as far as just, growing the audience little by little. I don't think either of us has any illusions of this becoming a world-dominating machine.
Speak for yourself.
Okay. I don't know if you knew this, but there are no other movie podcasts in
None.
This is it.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So what you can do, faithful listener or unfaithful listener,
We'll take either way.
either way, you can like and subscribe. Those are the words that everybody says a million times. And yes, they sound weird coming out of my face. But the other thing you can do is on Spotify specifically, there's always a little question at the end of the episode, and you can just click on there and answer. And some of these things have been answered. And I'm just going to give you a little example.
Ooh, I haven't seen these.
Yes. Okay, so for example, Annie, our Guess Who's Coming to Dinner episode,
Yes.
first episode of this series, one faithful listener left us the comment, man, this episode almost ended racism, which I appreciate.
Yes.
The accuracy of the statement and
The all caps on almost.
yeah, that's great. And then another faithful listener, I think you know who you are, just in all caps, because this is our first episode back for a while, just wrote, "We're back, boys."
Which
Take it as you will.
I'm not sure who the boys are.
Yes. So any opportunity you have to like and share a post or comment on an Instagram thing or talk to us on Spotify, we're happy to see those things. We like hearing from our listeners, and maybe someone else might hear the show because you kind of like it. Okay, that's enough commercialism. Let's get to what we watched this week. Okay, Annie, I'd like to hear from you first, if you don't mind. What did you watch this week?
All right. Well, I was scrolling through the
God bless you.
scrolling, and I came across a movie called In the Name of the Rose. Have you ever seen this?
No,
You would remember.
I don't.
So I just looked at this poster.
I thought you were going to say In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege, which is another movie that exists.
No.
It's not the same one.
No. That other one might be better. So In the Name of the Rose.
I don't think so, just for the record.
Well, it might be a race to the bottom.
Okay.
This is a movie that I watched a long time ago, and I remember that it was really weird, but I couldn't remember if it was really weird in a good way
Right.
or really weird in a bad way. So The Name of the Rose is a book that is often marketed. It's also a film, but started as a book. Often marketed as a murder mystery.
Okay.
Stop that. No. It's by a guy named Umberto Eco, who is this Italian philosopher, social commentator.
Okay.
And if you were a intellectual jerk in the 1980s,
You loved him.
you claimed that you understood him and thought he
Okay.
was wonderful.
One of those.
Yes. And so I have tried to read Umberto Eco many times. Don't.
Irritating.
Irritating.
Okay.
But this is like supposedly his like accessible work. It is a movie from 1986, which is just a year before our primary movie, and stars Sean Connery and a 17-year-old Christian Slater in his first leading role. And this is a medieval murder mystery, and they're in a monastery. And if you've ever wanted to watch Rod Perlman make a meal of live rats and then offer one to Sean Connery.
Where has this movie been waiting for me?
It's weird. You
Yeah.
just watch it for the weird.
I mean, it feels like all the ingredients should add up to
yeah,
brilliance.
it's odd.
Yeah. In the Name of the Rose?
In the Name of the Rose.
Okay.
It was a huge hit in Europe.
Yeah.
The Europeans loved it. They gave it all the awards.
So weird over there.
Total bomb in America. Like nobody watched it over here. Complete flop. I think if it was marketed as a supernatural horror movie,
Yeah.
it would have gotten more traction.
Right.
Because a murder mystery, this is not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yes, there are people getting murdered left and right, but
but it's not mysterious in the same way that you'd
You
think
just
it might
are
be.
thankful.
Yeah.
You know? So
man.
anyway, In the Name of the Rose, it has some good acting in it. And if you just want to wonder why, it's maybe worth a look. But don't say that I said it was good, because it's not.
Okay. I watched a movie starring Mel Gibson. It's called Payback. Do you know about this movie? He's been in like...
Did I see it in the theaters like a lifetime ago?
So there's like probably 6 Mel Gibson movies with that poster. See that poster?
Yeah, where he's
Okay.
just pretending to shoot the person to
Has
your right.
a gun in a leather jacket. Ransom, Payback, Lethal
Yeah.
Weapon. It's hard to keep these things
It doesn't look
straight
as funny as
in
Lethal
the
Weapon.
80s and 90s. No. So I've seen this movie several times, and I would say this is a peak teenage boys bedroom poster kind of a movie.
Well, depends which way those posters are going.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, 14-year-old boys see this and they're like, this is a cool film.
It's a tough
Like,
guy in a leather jacket pointing a gun.
and it's stylish, so it has like, it has some filmy flair to it that, like, if you don't like,
Look
if
at
you're
the tagline.
Yeah.
Get ready to root for the bad guy.
yes, okay, well that's actually that's more interesting than it looks. Anyway, okay, the reason I watched this movie again was because one, I already thought, oh, Payback's good. I like Payback. It's very like neo noir, but like dark humory.
Sure.
It's not really a shoot 'em up movie. It's more
okay.
it's more of a like guy walking around figuring out stuff.
Yeah, Mel Gibson when he was charming.
Yes, and he's very, I would say, okay, but that's what's interesting. I watched the director's cut, which I didn't know existed because I'm mooching off of your Prime Video.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, and I was like, Payback director's cut on Prime Video. What is this?
Yeah.
What's weird is director's cuts are usually like longer
Sure.
and re-edited and whatever. Like
Yeah.
you think of like Blade Runner or something like that, and it's like the directors
Yeah, they're
typically
always longer.
complain about things being left on the cutting room floor. This is 11 minutes shorter,
Interesting.
and it's way less goofy
Oh.
and more like gnarly.
Yeah.
And so like they take this guy who's like at the center of this neo-noir story, and in the theatrical cut, which I've probably seen like, I don't know, 5 times, he's very charming and jokey, and like he's not a good guy, but he's one of those like bad guys who's on the better side of the equation.
Yeah.
So you got to root for him.
Right.
And in this movie, it's like he is impossible. They make it impossible for you to root for him. So it's really interesting to watch as a director's cut, just sort of as like a film study thing. And then there's a half-hour documentary that I found out exists about the differences between the two.
Right.
And so watching that after having watched the director's cut was fascinating.
So the producers just wanted to make it more popcorny. Is that the...
Basically, so it's directed by Brian Helgeland, who like, I think he did The Wire and like
Okay.
some big TV shows. And I don't know, someone out there screaming right now because he's actually a big name. He's won an Oscar. He matters.
That's the definition.
He did A Knight's Tale. Speaking of a dungeon siege.
A Knight's Tale is one of those movies that I'm not going back to watch because I think of it fondly, and I want to
Yes.
continue thinking of it fondly.
Yeah, he hasn't done that many movies. A Knight's Tale, Payback, Legend, whatever that is. Anyway, he's a big TV director. He wanted to make it like gritty and gnarly, and the studio wanted to kind of lighten it up or whatever. And so he ended up leaving. And then the studio brought in like some second director guy,
Right.
and Mel Gibson, who's a big time producer in the 90s, right? Like he has his own production company.
You
This
don't
is
mean
like,
they didn't bring him in as an actor; they brought him in as a producer.
they brought him, like, he's such a heavy hitting producer
Right.
that he basically like helped rewrite the script,
Okay.
helped ghost direct sequences, and like all these things. I mean, this is like a few years before he would do Passion of the Christ and make
Sure.
like the most profitable independent movie
Right.
ever made. Anyway, it's not a movie for everyone, Payback. Believe it or not, I wouldn't like sit down with my grandma and watch Payback. But the differences between the two are fascinating. Just like the way you can change a movie by recutting it, rescoring it, and cutting out 10 minutes. It's wild. Like
Yeah.
they just feel totally different. So it's just a good reminder of like, man, the director makes a difference. The editor makes a difference. So I found it a very interesting
Well,
time.
rescoring a whole movie that's a big
It is
change.
and they like started from the ground up. It wasn't like, oh, we're gonna
right.
chop it up and cut and paste. No, they brought in a new guy
Yeah.
and he redid it. They went to and re-recorded it with the orchestra, and it's like, also, it's not as good. The original score is awesome. It's
like-
really cool, jazzy.
Okay, this
score.
is like inside baseball probably, but like who's paying for all of that? Because the
Yeah.
director's cut's not making money, right? I mean,
No, I mean, it's just getting released on like DVD and
I just can't imagine a director's cut getting
yeah.
a payday to pay for a whole new score.
I think if I remember correctly from the documentary, this is one of those situations where like the movie made good money in theaters, but then it made a bunch more when it came out on DVD.
Sure.
And then the legs for like the profit were long, and so they probably looked at it like, okay, there's this investment. We're not doing any reshoots. We're doing recuts and rescoring, and so there's a time investment and kind of a minimal money investment to be able to re-release the DVD that says director's cut and sell it again. You know?
Well, that looks like the type of movie that would like get a whole wall on Blockbuster.
Oh yeah. It would have like a standee with Mel Gibson. I'm making a gun thing with my hand right now. All right, that's what we watched this week. But it's time. It's time to sit down at the table again. And this week we have a Oscar winner. We're gonna talk about Babette's Feast in the intro section, which we call RSVPs.
Sorry, I'm not usually late.
Isn't this Parisian consomme a little thick?
Imagine if we didn't bring the wine. We'd be shunned by society. Outcasts! Where's your wine?
Mom, calm down. The party's not for another 3 hours. Oh, good. That will give me time to add another coat of glaze to the ham.
You wouldn't understand, but one fiasco dinner party can open wounds that may never heal.
All right, so 1987. It's rated G, and it's called Babette's Feast. This is a movie that I heard about originally from Justin a couple seasons ago, I believe. Maybe it was last season, 1950s. He had watched it and raved about it and said it was so good, particularly liked the cinematography and a lot of what it had to say. And this is a, international film? They don't call it that. They called it foreign film back then. Now they call it, which is... To be fair, I like that change to not just call everything different than America a foreign film, but you know, there are other countries in the world.
There are quite a few, in fact.
So it won that Oscar. And what kind of background information do we feel like is worth sharing here? I mean, it's a literary adaptation. You're going to know more about that than me.
Yeah, it's a short story written by Isaac Dinesen, whose real name is Karen Blixen. She's most famous for writing Out of Africa, based on her and her ex-husband, eventually. They ran, I think it was a coffee plantation farm in the early 20th century in Africa. So anyway, Out of Africa, very popular, both as a book and as a film.
That's the Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn movie?
No, that's the one with the boat.
What is that?
I don't know.
African Queen.
African Queen, yes. No, Out of Africa is like a autobiographical or semi-autobiographical film. Anyway, it won an Oscar the year before.
Okay.
And so she was a hot commodity. Everybody wanted to turn her work into film. And so they did. They found this short story, one from her last collection of short stories. She died about 20 years before this movie was made.
Okay.
And
I felt like watching this that I didn't know enough about the Franco-Prussian War to make some of the things in it make emotional sense to me.
I did a little tiny bit of research, but I don't think you really need to.
Okay.
Like, there's a couple facts that help solidify some things, but they are said in the script, even if very briefly.
Okay, good. I'm glad, because I felt a little dumb, and then I didn't try to fix that in any way, shape, or form. Can you clarify before we get into the movie? Is this taking place post-war or during war? Because it's kind of unclear, because we never leave the island.
Jutland in English, Jutland in Danish.
Yeah.
Well, this film, if you include the flashbacks, covers like 60 years or 50,
there's
60
a
years.
15-year jump in there.
But there's also, so there's a portion of this that's flashbacks when the sisters are young, like in their 20s. The majority of it happens either side of a 15-year jump. And I'm thinking it's like the sisters are in their 60s in the first one and then 80s in the second one.
So it's a little pre-war, post-war.
And so, but when the sisters are in their 60s is what I'm guessing, that is when Babette flees France as a refugee.
Gotcha. During the war.
Which would have been during the war. So the main action of the movie is post-war.
Okay. And
which is probably way more than you actually wanted.
No, that's fine. The director, Gabriel Axel, there you go, written by Karen Blixen and Gabriel Axel.
this was a big deal in Europe.
Yes.
So, but unlike In the Name of the Rose, it was also appreciated in America. So it was appreciated on both sides of the pond.
And it's found on a lot of people's lists. Some of those lists are specific, such as greatest food movies ever made. It's on a lot of those. I'm pretty sure Alton Brown said on that Hot Wings show that it was the best food movie ever made.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people. There's other people who just put it in their list of top 5, top 10 movies in general, which I think is interesting. Interesting indeed. Okay, it's a foreign movie, so please just like forgive at least me with some of the both of us
pronunciation and just lack of awareness of a lot of these actors, because I don't know every country's famous people.
No, and from what I understand, these actors are very famous in France or Denmark, but they are unknowns to your average American audience.
And it's 40 years old almost at this point. So, all right, well, that's enough intro. Let's get to the meat of the thing and what's cooking.
Crisp up those ducks. Drag those chickens. Slow them down just a little bit. We're a little ahead. Where are the apples? Still now? Do you still have them raw? Well, slice them up. Let's get them in the pan.
Don't put too many onions in the sauce.
What is this divine-looking amuse-bouche?
If I tell you, I'm afraid you won't even try it.
If everybody would please take your seats. Dinner is served.
All right, so we gave a little bit of the story. The story is so simple in a lot of ways. I mean, there's some decades-long plot elements that do happen, but I mean, by and large, it's about this refugee woman coming to live with and work for these two sisters who... What kind of movie? How would you answer that question? If someone was like, if you were like, man, I loved Babette's Feast, and like, well, what kind of movie is it? What would you say? A Danish one?
I mean, I was going to say, well, it's a foreign film, which is not very helpful. Yeah. I feel like the words that come to mind are would send someone in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It is meditative.
Yes.
It is philosophical. It is, about the meaning of what it is to be an artist. But all of those descriptors make it sound much more serious and heavy than it is. Like, I think it's, so I watched this about 20 years ago and hadn't seen it since. My memory of it was much darker and more serious than I experienced it this time. So I don't know if that was just the way I watched it before or if that was just a failure of memory, because I think there is a lightness to this and a humor and a joy to it that lifts up your expectations. So if I'm like, this has some really great thoughts on the nature of artistry and blah, 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 that sounds boring.
Yeah.
But there's enough whimsy mixed in here that it keeps it interesting. It
feels very slice of life. You know what I mean? Like, it's not trying to be overly dour, and it's a post-war movie. It's a war-torn country movie and person, at least in a lot of ways. And so those movies are allowed to and often do have that, like, there's a lot of talk about PTSD and like trauma and all those things these days, and those conversations need to happen. But like, this story's not like interested in that.
No,
it's really about like, what would it feel like to live here? And then what if this person showed up and changed the way we see things? And I don't know. I agree. Like, I looked at I'm getting old. I looked at the runtime, as I do with all these movies, and I'm like, I like some really long movies. I'm like way into a movie that's 2.5 hours and it's awesome the whole way through. But if I see a movie that's like 2 hours and I'm like, if it's boring, that's going to feel long.
Right.
And I had that thought.
Because what is this, an hour 40?
Yeah, it's only like an hour 40.
Yeah.
So it's really hour 45 maybe.
I will admit I checked the time a couple times.
Yeah, because meditative is a good word. So basically, let's give the plot if we can. So I mean, the setting is everything for this story. I think it's this island in Denmark.
No, it's a peninsula. I'm so sorry.
No, not an island, but
Jutland.
It's like coastal country.
Yeah, but like middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like deserted. Yes. They actually changed the location from the story because where she had set this in the story had since become built up in like a resort town, and it had a different connotation. So they changed the location in order to keep the remoteness. Remote. Yes. It's just you just have a feeling like this is a village of.
That's why I keep saying island. It's not literally an island, but it feels like
it's just a village of like 10 houses, and feels completely cut off from society.
Totally, and like 12 people live there.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're all 75 years old. Okay, so these two sisters were the daughters of this important religious figure. He was a pastor,
I think is what we would
say. Some unnamed denomination.
He's some sort of
Protestant.
Calvinist is what they say in the film. So, but just someone who was very severe and
and yet is well loved by people and has a legacy, and so they continue to live in this place and kind of have his old black and white picture hanging on the wall and carry on worshiping in their own way in his absence. And so okay, the beginning part of this movie is the bit that I think could be tightened. I don't know about
probably
you. I'm like watching the first maybe 25 to 30 minutes. And I'm thinking, okay, you're introducing these male characters into the story who one at a time, kind of in order, in line, catch the eye of.
So this is in the flashback.
Yeah.
And we find out that both of these sisters had a way out of this community.
Yeah, like a suitor, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
One was a military man, eventually becomes a general
with
who was
wicked cool mustache.
The nephew of a local wealthy woman.
Yes.
Who falls in love with one of them. Dad says no, and then
he just gives up and goes back to military life. Yep.
And stays single the rest of his life, as far as we know.
I think that's true.
And then a French opera star. Somehow finds his way to this little village and hears the other sister singing in church and is blown away. They had her voice was dubbed by a professional opera singer.
They do a lot of singing in this movie.
They do. There's a lot of singing.
About every 6 minutes or 7 minutes, it's like they cut to them just singing one of 3 hymns many times.
So the opera singer, volunteers to teach her, to train her in her singing, but that gets shut down as well, and he leaves.
Yes, the singing lesson scene made me uncomfortable. It's not like particularly.
I might have been looking up details about the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah, it's not particularly aggressive or anything, but I find like I like lots of different kinds of music. I have been to the opera. I find opera to be a slightly inaccessible art form to me. It's very big.
I think they were singing a love song from The Marriage of Figaro. Like they were singing a very romantic song, which was, part of it.
Yeah, but he's getting friendly.
Well, yeah, he has an agenda.
He's getting friendly. Anyway, so that they have a potential way out if they want it, and they don't take it. They decide to stay. Babette shows up. There's some connection with
like 40 years later.
Yeah, a lot of time goes by.
Well, the opera singer, who's also French, knows that Babette needs to escape Paris and says, "Go to these people out in Jutland.
Right,
they'll take care of you," and they do.
Yeah, it felt a little hat on a hat to me, right? To have like both of those guys' stories, one of which you kind of don't need. Like the opera singer guy, they both had a way out, but like, do you need to say that twice? I don't know. That part felt long to me. There's a lot of like.
Well, you know what we haven't said? We haven't said that this is all subtitled.
Oh, it's yeah, of course.
Yeah,
it's not in English.
Well,
the words are on the screen. The ones I was reading.
And I think one thing
it's in Dutch or
Danish.
Danish.
That's what they speak in Denmark.
Danish.
And French. And I think that was one of
there's some French.
There was a couple scenes that I was listening to really carefully to notice that when the conversation was in Danish versus French.
Yes.
And I think you lose something when you're just reading it all subtitled into English. But that was a small thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I lost some things. Okay, and then Babette shows up, which is kind of the thing that matters most in the movie, and works kind of faithfully for them. You don't get a lot of time with her. It's interestingly
but she makes the whole village better just by living there.
Going about town, you get a couple little vignette scenes with her at the grocer and Where else?
Getting fish from the fisherman.
Fish from the fish guy.
And you can tell everybody loves her.
Yeah.
Everyone is charmed by her. The sisters say, we've never had so much money since Babette came to live with us. And
so they're
because
just,
she's so good at like
managing things.
And, sweet talking the fisherman into giving her more fish and whatever. Yeah. But she is beloved. Like this whole village just brightens up whenever she appears in their midst.
When they're all squabbling, she comes in and has the sort of like the ability to talk to all these elders in a way that I'm sure other people wouldn't. She says, like, knock it off, basically.
Yeah. But she brings delight into their community.
Yeah. And then the one thing we know from one of those conversations is that she has a lottery ticket that somebody renews for her. Is it every month?
Every year, I think.
Every year. They do an annual lottery at this point in France.
It feels like that Isaac Dennison or Karen Blixen, whatever we're calling her.
Yeah.
Like she's writing a fable. Like this story is 100% a fable, which is why you forgive it for just kind of like conveniences. And now there is a lottery.
And guess who's going to win it? The person who the movie's named after. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what do we think is going to happen the minute she wins the lottery? Because it's kind of clear to the sisters, well, you're out of here.
The sisters, it's 20 years after the war. I mean, it's over. And they just assume she's going to go start her life again in France and go home.
And she says she'd rather.
Well, they're planning on having some sort of gathering to celebrate their father's 100th birthday.
He dead, though.
Yeah, long
He's wearing
past.
food. Yeah.
But they were going... The way you talk about people who have died
he's a dead sack of meat.
Always memorable.
Yep.
And so she goes, okay, but before I go, let me cook like a French meal for you. Because they've been requiring her or asking her gently, kindly to cook their very sloppy, gross food.
Right.
And which she has been making better. You see her like sneaking herbs into things.
I saw that.
But she's been cooking this very bland, very boring food for them for 14 years.
Yes. Ale and bread soup.
And then like rubbery fish, boiled.
Yeah, they like leave it out on a string to dry for some reason.
Yeah. And she goes, okay, but let me cook you a French dinner.
Yes.
For this event.
Of all the movies we've watched so far, and we've been like, man, I guess who's coming to dinner? They never even make it to the meal.
Right.
And at Gosford Park, it's not really about the food.
Right.
And then, well, at least I guess in August Osage County, they got to scream about the fish for a while. Drop a casserole.
Like breakfast.
This movie is all about the food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, our timer will go off at some point.
It will.
And I'll ask you the fateful question.
Yes.
But we can talk about maybe some of the ingredients of the food before we get started, because she orders all these lavish ingredients.
She goes to France. She's gone for a week.
Yes.
She comes back in a wagon that is full.
Yes. See, that's another scene. I kept thinking island because it looks like they got off a boat and were unloading things off of a boat. And so,
maybe they were.
I don't know. They had a big block of ice.
They did. That was for the champagne.
Yeah. So we start to see ingredients.
There's a turtle.
Yes, I wrote in my notes, a freaking turtle.
And all I could think of was like the animal protection comments, And,
yes.
And yeah.
Peter loves this movie.
Dear listener, if you have a sensitivity towards animals, maybe this is a movie to skip.
If you have a cage full of pet quail.
Yeah, the quail. My theory is that they did not actually kill that turtle, but the quail were not long for this world.
The turtle had to die.
I don't think the turtle had to die. You never saw a dead turtle, but the quail you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did.
They were very cute before they were plucked.
Yep. Okay, so lavish meal, crazy expensive ingredients, and I think if we got to talk about what the story's saying a little bit. So everything leading up to this is really laying like layers of foundation over and over and over again.
Sure.
What the first thing that happens in the story that like is kind of it woke me up again, to be honest, because like, again, it's not a boring movie, but it is very like. It's like if you were to walk around that town and just breathe the sea air and have no technology, that's what it feels like to watch this movie. You know what I mean? So there's no like reflections or
everything is blue-gray tones. The clothing, the houses.
It's a very nicely lensed movie, by the way. It looks great. And I probably 2 or 3 scenes into it went, oh, this is probably one of those natural light movies like Barry Lyndon, where they didn't use any bulbs and everything is candlelight and daylight. It looks like that. It looks great.
Oh, and there's many shots throughout the film that look like a Dutch still life painting, like Vermeer or the old masters. Like they are clearly recreating some of those. Yeah. Some of that famous Dutch art or Danish art, since they're in Denmark and not the Netherlands.
Okay, we're even. She says she wants to make the meal, and they're like, no, you can't do that. And then she says, have I ever asked you for anything? And they say, okay, fine, you can do it. And then as soon as they see the ingredients, they freak out.
Yes. And mostly because of the liquor. It's not liquor, it's wine. But
there's wine, champagne, and there's got to be some kind of after dinner drink in there too.
She's got 3 or 4 types of wine, of alcohol. And I think that is what really kind of panics them.
I think it's the food too, though, right?
Yeah, I think it's all of it.
Because they have this weird little town meeting where they're like, I'm so sorry. We don't know what she's going to feed you. And they all go, we will all promise not to say a word for you and your father's sake.
Like, we promise not to taste it. But I think this is...
Yeah, okay. This is what I was trying to get at. What that setup matters.
Yes.
Because then you watch 25 minutes of the actual
dinner. I think this is one of the pieces that's misunderstood.
Yeah.
We read some of the reviews and commentary about this film about how it's about a bunch of cold-hearted, bitter, Protestants, whatever. But I think the very fact that their response is, we will come to dinner,
right.
We will eat the food.
We'll be polite.
We will be polite. Yeah. We will be kind. We just, because this community has on some level equated pleasure with sin.
Yeah.
Like they're like, well, we just won't be pleasured. We won't find pleasure in it. And then we'll be okay. But we're still being gracious to Babette, which I think people miss. Mm-hmm. Because we all know of situations where the response by someone like that is to just say, well, no, I won't participate. I won't come. I won't be there.
Totally, yeah.
And to respond with judgment and the community doesn't.
Right.
They, I still don't agree with their initial plan. I still think
to quote, not taste the food
yes,
as they eat it.
We will not taste. But I also think that what this gets at is that this community, whatever else they have going on, there is this kind of really sweet naivete towards the way they live. Like there is an innocence and a naivete to how they live. And I think that when people accuse this community, when movie reviewers accuse this community of being angry and bitter and judgmental, I'm like, I think you missed something.
Yeah, and I think it's not as interesting of a movie if anybody is too caricature-y in that way, right? Like you don't really know enough about the dad to know that he was like some abusive, like cult leader kind of figure. In fact, when you see him pictured, he just looks like old-fashioned, you know? And I mean, maybe severe in his religiosity, but not in like when he kicks the opera singer guy out, you're like, yeah, that guy had to go.
But he kicks the opera singer out because his daughter asked him to.
Yeah, which he's not ruling her with an iron fist or something. Yeah.
No, and that's what I mean. There is a kindness and a gentleness among this community, even though there's some quibbling and there's some, normal stressors among, like you get anytime you get people together.
Sure.
But yeah, I guess I just wanted to stand up for this movie and say, I don't think this community is as bitter and angry as
and I don't think it's a movie about Babette like changing all of them from their core,
right?
By serving them this lavish food, which is I think
agree.
Some people's read on it. It's like she opens their eyes to sensory pleasures they've or whatever, and it's like, well, that's not all that's happening.
No, I think it's much more interesting. So what if we talk about what is interesting?
Okay, one thing that's interesting is when they have that reaction to the ingredients, they cut to the next scene, and it's one of the sisters laying in bed, and she has a freaking turtle nightmare.
She does.
And there's like a turtle going in her face.
Yes.
And I thought that was fun.
I think what that points out is that their concern truly
Turtles are scary. It points out that turtles are scary.
Turtles are scary. Is that this is like an internal struggle. Like it's not just all external. And by that I mean like it's not all about like judging Babette. Like she does have a internal conscience that's rising up in this.
And they call it a witch's Sabbath.
A witch's Sabbath.
Okay. I said it's a slice of life movie. Mm-hmm. Feels like walking around the town. These are all nice things we're saying about the movie. I also want to say it's fun. Like, it's not like guffawing funny, but it feels funny like real life is funny most days.
I think that's what I meant when I said whimsy.
Yeah.
Like there's just like the turtle.
Hallelujah guy. The Hallelujah guy. It's a great bit. Hallelujah guy. Keep it up.
It's like his only line. And
it's wonderful.
Whenever something's good, it's what he says.
By the third time he says it, you realize what he's doing. And then every time you're waiting for an opportunity for him to say it again. And usually he does. It's pretty fun.
So, there's just little tiny comic moments.
Yeah.
And so that I really think keep this movie from being, there was a word you used earlier that was good, but a bore. It keeps it light, which is good.
So what's
dour? It keeps it from being dour.
Yeah. What is it saying? I mean, in the end, spoiler alert, they all eat this incredibly, intricate meal. And then the very ending of the movie essentially is them saying, well, we thank you so much for the food. Something about you going to Paris. And she goes, I'm not going to Paris. I spent every cent I had won in the lottery on this meal. And then the movie's kind of over.
So some people say what I said before, that this is about a bunch of angry Calvinists being taught to enjoy physical pleasures or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's simplistic. And then there's another reading, which I think is more legitimate, which is about what it means to be an artist.
Right. And she does bring that up at the end.
And that gets explicitly talked about,
right?
Which is the joy for the artist is in the creating.
Right.
So regardless of whether or not these people enjoyed the meal, she had the joy of making it.
Right.
And so I think to me, that's like the middle layer. And that's valid in there. I think there's another layer of meaning that is far more interesting. And it has to do with grace and what it is to be a person of grace and to bring grace into a community. And when you said something about not doing the historical research, there the one piece I'm glad I looked up.
Oh boy.
That's good because I've been talking for too long. So let's.
You were also getting to the answer to the question of the podcast.
Okay, I know what it is. I have it written down in my notes, so I can come back.
All right. This movie, that's the timer, folks, which in this series means we have to ask ourselves the question, what do you think of the food? It's too much in this movie to do it so simply. So I'm just going to ask kind of
I've been talking a lot. You answer first.
Okay. I'll go first, then you can go second.
Sure.
Which of the courses in this movie do you want to eat the most?
Okay.
I think my answer is the soup, which is made
at the very beginning
from the freaking turtle.
You want the turtle soup
because, everything. I understand why foodies and people like Alton Brown are like, this is the greatest food movie ever made, because there's a lot of care. If you look up the facts about the movie or read some old reviews, it took 2 weeks to film that whole segment. The prep, there's a lot of care in showing the prep. There's a lot of care in showing the presentation, showing people enjoying the food, all that stuff. I've never tried turtle.
and it's very hard to do so legally these days.
Yes. So. And everything else in there, I think I've tried some version of. I'm not saying it's been as good as the one Babette makes, but also the fruit looked very tasty.
So you can't take my answers.
Okay, sorry. I take it back. Just the turtle.
So this movie was made in 87 or came out in 87.
Yes.
And in the 1980s, French food was...
It was all the rage.
All the rage. Yeah. Going to a fancy meal and going to a French meal was the same thing, at least in America. And so the fact that, you have this French woman from, who had been, we find out, a chef in Paris, even though that was not a normal job for a woman.
Okay. Is she the chef that he mentioned?
Yes. Okay. So this is what I was getting to, but I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it looks that good of a meal.
Whoa. Bombshell.
I don't. Like, everyone's like, this is the greatest food movie ever. And I agree with you. Like, the broth looked nice. I certainly enjoyed the Limoges tableware. I'll take the porcelain service. Thank you.
Dork.
Did I notice in the write-up where the porcelain was made? Yes, I did.
That's crazy. I just want to eat that turtle. I don't know what to say.
I thought the dessert looked good. It was like a cake and some really good-looking fruit.
Like a rum cake.
I thought, rum cake. Yeah. I thought the booze was interesting. I would have.
Well, it is one of those things where, like, we will talk about this in a future movie too.
Yes.
When people talk about like how good a wine is on screen, it's one of those things that's like, I know I'm not like, I don't have that refined of a palate.
Right.
When I try something new, it's like, tastes red.
Yes.
But it also simultaneously, I'm thinking like, man, they're making it sound really good. So like in this movie, when they're talking about the guy with the mustache comes back, spoiler alert, old version of Military Man comes back to this meal and has a conversation with himself saying, you know, old.
Because he's the only one who hasn't promised not to talk about the food.
Yes. And he's sort of made a vow with himself to like older self to younger self, like, you have to prove to me that I made the right decision in leaving and not taking her with me or whatever. Anyway, that was the food. If you really want to see a lot of food, watch this movie. There's a lot of food in it. You were making a really salient point about what this movie's about, and we got off track because some idiot set a timer.
It's all right. I show up here of my own free will.
Yeah.
This was something I don't remember noticing the first time I watched it. Granted, that was 20 years ago, so who knows. But when Babette shows up as a refugee, they say that, you know, she's from Paris. Her husband and her son have been killed by, and then they name a general.
Okay.
And which, of course, I did not write down the general's name because that would have been a useful piece of information.
Lapine or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, anyway.
I said it wrong, but that's how it's spelled in the English.
Okay. So that is the piece of history I looked up. So there was this French general who just went around slaughtering people in the streets for no good reason, like, and that's real history.
Okay.
And so he was, it wasn't just that they were in war, but he was a maniac. He's in war.
Okay.
And was famous for that. And so this is a name that would have put fear in the hearts of people, like Stalin would.
Right,
you know.
right.
And so then when they're having the meal 14 years later, and the general who almost, you know, who was the love interest of one of the sisters.
Yeah.
When he starts talking about, oh, this food tastes just like this restaurant I went to in Paris, and we find out that Babette was the chef at that restaurant. He says, I always went there with my friend, General.
That's the guy.
And so what you understand about Babette is not only is she like expressing her artistry,
right,
and sacrificing any hope of ever living anywhere other than this, you know, backwater for the privilege of putting this meal on and the joy of putting this meal on. She's also serving a man, joyfully serving him, giving him preferential treatment,
right?
Because I think she knows he's the only one at the table who's really understands what he's eating.
Yeah.
Who was a compatriot, a colleague with the man who murdered her son and murdered her husband. And so
I totally missed that.
Why
don't they make a bigger deal of that? That's
I know.
That's an important part of the story.
Right.
This
but
automatic,
you know,
automatic C- for this movie.
This movie did give me time to look that stuff up while I read subtitles.
Well, and that's so interesting and so like reinforces the theme that is said out loud via dialogue. I would say one thing about this movie, it's like this is not a subtle movie.
No.
It's like meditative, yes, and sort of like patient, yes. Not subtle.
Well,
like
it's a fable. I think that's why I said the word fable. Like fables aren't supposed
it's a fable.
to. Fables are supposed to be understood by children.
The general literally stands up at the end of the meal and says like, the moral of the story, folks, right? Grace upon grace, and like he gives a little like 30-second sermon, which basically gives you the point of the story.
Right. So I've read a bunch of reviews of this movie, both from 25 years ago and from recently.
Yeah.
No one mentions it.
That's weird.
No one mentions it, and I'm like, I didn't make it up.
Prize. You should be awarded with the food that you don't think looks good.
Just send me the.
You know what?
Send me the booze.
I will kill a turtle for you.
I don't. Morgan can have the champagne. I'll take the rest of it.
Okay. Okay. What about some other things I liked about this movie? I like when the old lady takes a sip of champagne and she says, "It must be some kind of lemonade."
Oh, well, the scene that gets commented all the time that I like is that the woman who was leading the charge in not tasting.
Yes.
Like at one point the boy who's helping her serve
sneaks some wine.
Well, yes, he does that.
I love
but
that
he
too.
fills up one. They have like 4 glasses each.
Yes.
He fills up one of them with water at some point. And so she's all excited to get a new beverage. She sips the water and stares at it. It's like, oh no. Puts it back down and then grabs the giant wine glass again so she can enjoy the wine some more.
There are a lot of nice little hidden moments like that. I did get a little done watching people chew.
Yep.
Probably like minute 18 or 19. And I understand that the purpose of it is how much there is. That becomes the point. But I would just say from a pacing perspective, I was really happy when they cut back to the kitchen and you got to see the driver of the carriage trying little things and the boy and he tries this and she goes, no, because it's got alcohol in it or whatever.
Right. Yeah. She's trying to stop the boy from sneaking the booze.
Yeah. I think it's again, if you want to know what a movie like this says, the best thing you can do is go watch it, not necessarily listen to people like me or Annie tell you, because it's in the dialogue. So if you enjoy your time with the movie and in the not island place that they're living, the moral of the story is on the lips of the characters. And I think it does have a lot of interesting stuff to say that is very resonant about mercy and giving of what you have to others, even if it's this exorbitant looking thing.
And the grace is going both ways. I think, yes, Babette is doing most of the grace giving, certainly in the last act.
Yeah.
But she was welcomed into this community as a woman with absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And yes, she is, quote, working for these sisters, but she's just a third woman in the household. She has been taken in and supported and loved and cared for.
Yeah, that scene where she arrives is probably, it's one of my favorite acted moments of this because it's sort of like the story you've heard 100 times. It's Les Mis, it's, whatever. It's a refugee, type character, just desperately saying I have nowhere to go, and acting. Let's talk about the acting. It's all good.
Yeah, so the French Babette.
I got no beef.
Babette is an extraordinarily famous French actress.
Yeah.
So I understand.
She's good. I think the sisters are good. This is a story that I recognize for being amazing, in its themes, but also somehow weirdly not I don't know, I didn't cry. And I cry at things sometimes.
We mentioned earlier that this is people say this is the best food movie ever.
Yeah.
I'm just going to graciously bow out of that conversation because I didn't think that the skeletalized quail looked all that interesting.
Skeletalized. There's a close-up of her adjusting the head as she plates it. Yeah.
Of a
and
quail.
Then he picks up the head and goes
crunches it. Yeah. So I'm just going to agree to disagree on that one. I enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
But I'm not putting it in a top 10 list. I'm not even going to consider putting it in a top 10 list. But what I will say is I think it's trying to address some very lovely topics or some, important beautiful truths about life that often don't get addressed in film. So I'll give it that.
And not in this way.
No.
Right? You have other sort of pop culture reference points for something like undeserved grace, but they're usually, I don't know, the one that always comes to mind is the Hamilton moment,
and Les Mis.
Les Mis is a big one, but it's bigger in Les Mis.
Yeah.
It's more, for lack of a better
dramatic
term, theatrical, and in this it's very muted, and this is what I think. This is a highly successful movie. Everything it's trying to do, it's doing very, very well.
Right.
And I wouldn't put it on my top 10 list either. There's just something too, I don't know. It's beautifully shot, but it doesn't really feel cinematic, if that makes sense.
And the sets are very clearly sets. They may be.
Yeah, they built all these little
and you can
cottages.
It kind of looks like they did an IKEA run.
Did IKEA exist in 1987?
Probably barely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they bought out the whole warehouse.
But so, like, I agree. Like, the lighting, when you're talking about how beautifully this is shot, like the lighting, absolutely. The color palette,
it's
absolutely.
nice to look at. Yeah.
But it is very clearly a set that they're running around.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Let's get into the wrap up. I think they were eating rum cake and fruit and some other kind of figs. I like figs. You like figs?
They're okay.
Okay. Well, let's eat some figs.
Bob, could you help the carnivore cut his meat?
Wait, let's talk about the elephant not in the room.
How do you take caviar, sir?
No caviar from me, thanks. Never did like it much.
What have you been drinking, Herbert? Oh, you should ask Tom. He poured it. You weren't trying to poison me, were you?
I drink your milkshake.
All right, this is our Just Desserts section where we give you the answer to the two questions we try to always answer, and I'm pretty sure we do sometimes. Is it worth your time? How often would you rewatch it? But first, before we do that, before we get to our final thoughts, we have the thoughts of the masses in a section we call Bad Letterboxd Reviews. Bad Letterboxd Reviews. So we're going to read some Bad Letterboxd Reviews. I'm going to read them. Don't read them.
Okay.
I'm going to read them to you because I want you. My eyes. There you go. I want you to have real-time reactions. These are Bad Letterboxd Reviews. In fact, all of them are not bad today. Interestingly, so this section title makes zero sense. These are just Letterboxd reviews. Okay, the first one is bad. It's from Letterboxd user Find Films. It's for 1.5 stars, and the review says, "Okay, too Lutheran."
Well, I don't think there were any Lutherans in this film. So.
That's what I was going to say too. I don't even think it's a little Lutheran.
I think Lutherans have totally fine with the wine.
I think they're fine with the wine, and I think they kill turtles once a week.
Yeah, I think I understand the reviewer's point.
Yes.
But.
Okay. Next one is a 2-star review by Angus HT03. We all know him well. The review says, "Pulling up to the potluck with the tortoise." Which I love. Again, anybody out there have a turtle they want to sacrifice? I want to try turtle soup. So, okay, another one here we have is from Colin Burgess. This is a 5-star review with a heart. This is the highest honors that you can give a Letterboxd movie.
This guy has it on his top 10.
Like a revenge movie, except instead of Babette trying to murder the people that wronged her, she cooks a really nice meal for people that have been nice to her.
So, like, not like a revenge movie at all.
It's like nice revenge.
So it's just being thankful?
Yes. Okay. And then last but not least, my favorite review, 4 stars with a heart. Mm-hmm. However that works. This is from Thomas Flight, and it just says, "Hallelujah."
Which is excellent.
Yeah. There's an Hallelujah guy in the movie, and all he says is Hallelujah. And it's pretty great. So would you rewatch this? How often would you rewatch this? I guess the answer that you've already given is once every 20 years. I think it's the same as Gosford Park, interestingly.
No, Gosford Park was every 7.5 years.
7.5.
I think I'll watch Gosford Park before I'll watch this again.
Okay. Why?
I think I got it. Like, it's a lovely little movie.
Yeah.
But like, I think I got it.
I think I'm with you. This is one of those ones that is highly successful in what it sets out to do, but I don't think is super rewatchable. Like,
no.
Like I think I got it is that should be your Letterboxd review. Like, also, like, what are you gonna glean from a second viewing of this, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're paying attention, if it didn't put you to sleep, and if you're in it for that hour 43, I feel like yeah, like, I don't feel like it's designed to be watched 100 times.
I think a million years ago, when you had Ellie on to talk about Wuthering Heights. No, I talked about Wuthering Heights. She talked about
the
Great
Dickens,
Expectations.
Great Expectations.
And I think it was that movie. She said this is a great movie to put on a October night when you want to fall asleep on the couch. Like, I think this. Yeah, you could fall asleep to this if you wanted to.
Yeah. So that's both of our answers to both questions.
Yeah.
Not highly rewatchable, but worth your time. Like,
yeah, and I'd recommend it to someone who enjoys thinking about the movies they're watching, like someone who just likes to go watch, Fast Cars Go Boom.
Bored to tears.
Right? Yeah, like absolutely not. Don't watch this. Do not. If you like quippy dialogue, don't watch this.
If you like quail murder, however, probably watch this. Okay, well, I think for all of the sort of not following through on the premise of what a dinner party movie actually is, this is a real one.
This is
the bill.
The ultimate dinner party movie.
It is. So I'm glad we watched it. I'm ready to move on to the last film in the series and eat our final course. It's a very different kind of movie.
I think it might be the most different kind of movie that also involves a dinner party.
Which it does. We hope you join us for the thrilling conclusion of the dinner party series. Bye.
See ya.
Let the movie speak.
Kostbar ci, cienie